and on Facebook. All right, very good. Joe, do you want to kick us off?
Happy to do that. Carol, one thing I noticed is that I had to update the version of Zoom that was on my iPad in order to sign on. So if anybody's having trouble, it's easy to do.
Perfect, thank you.
All right, well, Carol, looks like we have, what, 60 or more families now? Let's, what are we up to?
We're at 67 right now.
Yeah, wow. Well, that's wonderful. Thank you all. As you can see, I got real dressed up. I have my weekend Saturday baseball cap and my sweatshirt, and it's raining here in Sacramento, but I guess we'll still take the rain, even though we've had a lot. We need more, but we'll take that. I want to just take a moment to welcome you all, families from around the world. We have a great presentation today, both about the foundation and about the research. We've had a lot of progress, even since the family conference last July. Lots of good things to report. Pretty exciting stuff for our children. So, Carol, I think, with that welcome, thank you all. This is an organization and a group that relies on our families around the world. We're all one family to make this progress and make this help for our children. And it's just really exciting. I'm so excited to be able to watch and see, because even though I kind of had a preview of all being involved in everything all along the way, it just is exciting every time we talk about it. So Carol and Christina and everybody, thank you. Thank you to the Jordan's Guardian Angels team who worked so hard to put this together, and I'll just let you all take it over from here.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Joe. So our agenda today, I'm gonna kick us off with a few slides that our JGA team have prepared to share with you all. So brings everyone up to date with our progress. For those of you that have been doing this with us for a while, you might have heard this once or twice. So I'm gonna put a quick poll out there. You can tell us how many times you've been on either in-person or virtual conferences. So we just get an idea of our group here, but we'll give that a minute and then we can review the results together. So I'm going to bring up a presentation. I'm going to ask Joe and our team members if at any time, I miss anything or you'd like to add anything, please just jump in and do that. Even though I'll be doing a lot of the talking here, please feel free to do that at any point. And if you have any questions at this point, please put them in the chat and then we'll make sure to get to them in the Q&A session. We have a packed agenda and we want to make sure we get to everything. All right, I'm going to share my screen here. Can everyone see the presentation okay?
Yes.
Yep, perfect. Let me trying to get into presenter mode. Interesting. Is it in full screen for you guys?
No.
Yeah.
No, it's too little.
No.
Yeah, that's weird. I'll try again. All right, for the poll, we had 33% say they have too many to count. We have 16%, 9 families that this is their first encounter with us, so welcome. And then we have a few in between. So I'm gonna close this and open it again. Sorry about that, never fails. Just bring up the presentation one more time. I think with all the families coming in, it's slowing down the system.
Carol and Brittany, would you guys mind sending the link and inviting again? Thank you.
If it's helpful, I can try to share too, Carol.
Yeah, I'm not sure why, but just give me 1 second, try one more thing, and then we can go from there. Yeah, why don't you go ahead, Brittany? It's not letting me get into full screen.
Sure, just give me 1 second here. Do you have it in the JGA team folder in Dropbox?
Yep. It's in the 2023 files.
Aha.
All right, we're at 70 participants. Welcome, everyone. I hope the translation service is working. Okay. All right, perfect. Thank you, Britt.
Larry, if you don't mind
Okay.
monitoring the chat, I can't look at the chat while I'm doing this.
I got it.
Okay.
All right, perfect. So let's get started. Next slide, please. All right, so welcome to our new families. You know, we have 9 families that this is their very first encounter with us. So welcome. There's going to be a lot of information shared today. Please don't get overwhelmed. Know that we can always meet up later and answer any questions you might have. Your ambassadors are a great resource for you to use as well. But this is a QR code with a welcome family a new family packet. So there's a lot of information there that you can go over and just take your time through that. We even created a little roadmap for everyone, so it's not all overwhelming. So start with the beginning of the road, and as you're ready, do more along that roadmap. Next. So very high level, Dr. Chung and her team might cover more of that, but Jordan syndrome, currently we're using this term to define mutations in the genes PPP2R5D, 2R5C, and 2R1A, and that's what our current community on the call today and on Facebook consists of. And it's a neurodevelopmental disorder characterized by mild or profound delays. It's typically de novo. That means it's non-inherited. So there's nothing that you did or could have avoided that would avoid this mutation. It really starts random. But once you have that mutation, there's a 50% chance of you passing it on to your children. And we do have a few cases in our group that is inherited, and we have 2 or 3 generations of individuals with Jordan syndrome. Currently, it's believed that it's that is underrepresented, and there's hundreds of thousands of individuals in the world that are not diagnosed with Jordan syndrome currently. And that's part of why we do our awareness efforts, is to connect to more of these individuals. There are multiple variants within the group, but you can see that even within each of the variant, there's a wide variability in terms of severity and how it's affecting the individual. And this is like a little infographics that we created, just an easy way to look at the many ways that Jordan syndrome affects our children and adults with the syndrome. Next one, Britt. So a little background on Jordan's Guardian Angels, and Joe, feel free to jump in here as well. And if you'd like to share anything more, but Cynthia and Joe Lang, who are the parents to Jordan, founded the foundation, and really it's to seek answers for PPP 2R5, D2R5C, and 2R1A currently. And the research team has been put together with that in mind. Another part of the mission is to assist and improve the quality of life for children and families. And we do a lot of support and community support to make sure that we're supporting our families in many ways outside of just the research. Next one. And this is our amazing research team, and I'm going to pass it on to everyone to speak a little bit about themselves. But Cynthia and Joe, as I mentioned, they are the co-founders. Joe is the chair of the foundation right now. They really were instrumental in getting our research team together that you'll get to hear from in a little bit, and putting, you know, an agreement in place that makes sure all children are protected in the long run, and we're driving towards a collaboration and really forming this amazing team, JGA team, that works on their behalf and behalf of our families around the clock. And of course, getting the funding that moves us all forward. So last year, they were actually awarded a Founders Award by Global Genes for all their efforts within our community. So we're really thankful for everything they've done from the very beginning and where we're at today. And then there's me, Carol. I'm the parent to Yara, who's 9 years old and was diagnosed with Jordan syndrome 7 years ago. There were 6 known cases in publication at that time. And I'm thankful to have been part of this effort from the very beginning. I remember that my first call was Joe so many years ago now. But I get to act as a point person between the research team, our families, our ambassadors, and our JGA group, and kind of work with this team on our initiatives to move our mission forward. Brittany, to you.
Hi, everyone. My name is Brittany. I have been fortunate enough to be the Director of Advocacy and Engagement and be with the foundation for 6 years. I am your go-to if you need anything advocacy related, policy related, and with social media, blogs, things like that.
Thank you. Christina?
Hi, everybody. I'm Christina Janes. It's nice to see all of your faces today. I am the Director of Outreach and Content Development for JGA. So chances are, if you're receiving an email, it's probably coming from me. We do all of the media outreach, the emails, your quarterly newsletters, JGA Connection, any of our new videos, which if you stick around today, we have a brand new one coming for you at the very end of this. So we're excited to share that with our whole community. We maintain the website. We're busy. So this team is amazing, and I'm so happy to see all of you. We're making so much progress, and it's just so excited to be a part of all of it. So if you have any questions that's outreach or content development related, anything that's on the website, those info sheets that you see, please reach out, and we can help to answer any of those questions. So thanks everybody for being here today.
Thank you, Christina. So Candace couldn't be with us today. She's actually in Disney on a trip that had been scheduled for a while, but many of you know Candace as the mom to Hutton, and their family has done multiple fundraisers for our group throughout the years, and we're thankful to have her on a more official capacity this year as a family engagement coordinator. She set her goal to raise $1 million this year for our foundation, so that's exactly why we have her on, and that will help our research efforts, but also will help us support our families in multiple ways. And you'll hear more on that as we go forward. Kayla?
Hi, everybody. My name's Kayla. I've taken on kind of a new role recently where I've been doing the graphic design for all of our printouts and things like that. I also do kind of the day-to-day in the office here in Sacramento. So it's nice to be here and see everybody.
And Lexi?
Hi, everyone. My name is Lexi Levine. I am a sister to Barry, who was diagnosed with PPP2R5D, the E198K variant. I am the sibling support coordinator, so I help to run SIB shops, which are workshops for the siblings of people with Jordan syndrome to talk about their experience of having a sibling with a disability and kind of some of the challenges, but also the good things that go with that. And I'm also involved with the advocacy subgroup as well.
Perfect. And Larry?
Hi, everybody. Welcome to the new families. My official title is event coordinator, so I do a lot of work with putting our in-person meetings together. Also, like the rest of this team, although nobody said it, it's sort of an all hands on deck. Whatever needs to be done, we can all take care of it. The one thing I wanted to mention, since we have such a great participation, especially for our new families, I also keep the map on our website updated that has locations for our families for all three variants, or all three genes, I should say. And if anybody needs a location change or wants to add a picture, or for some of our older families might want to update a picture that we can put in there, I'm happy to do it. If you don't, I completely understand.
Thank you. Thank you to everyone. We really have a power team and we have the resources in-house to do almost anything we want to do. It's an amazing team that works around the clock, and I'm very thankful to have them all supporting our families. All right, next. All right, so every year we sit down and really think about what is our mission for the year? How do we move our efforts as a foundation forward? And this year we came up with 7 pillars, and that really generated over 100 action items that this team will be working through throughout the year. And I'm not going to dive a lot through each of those just for the sake of time, but I'm just going to mention at a high level what they mean. So in advocacy or advocate, many of you work with Brittany as a part of the special project committee on advocacy. And this is looking beyond just Jordan syndrome and the rare disease community, how as a foundation, as a community, we play a big role in moving the needle forward for rare diseases. And we've participated in a lot of efforts there, and we'll continue to do that. Under access, this event today is an example of that, but it's really creating these connection opportunities for our families, for our research team, for our medical advisory board, for the foundations to really come together and be able to access each other and connect. Translation services is a big part of that, and that's one of the big goals for us this year, is to enable all these great deliverables we've created last year in English, to enable them in the many languages that are spoken within our community. And our ambassadors have been amazing in helping us achieve that. Communicate, I mean, you heard both Brittany and Christina talk about that, but it's really the weekly newsletters that I hope everyone is getting and reading, the communication to our stakeholders, the many videos that we put out. There's really kind of keeping everyone in the loop and updated, like through the blog, through our podcast. So there's really a lot of ways for you to connect here. Fundraise is a little self-explanatory. We have a couple slides later that talk about specific campaigns there, but that's what Candice is helping us achieve this year as well. Educate is Jordan syndrome specific, and that's telling the world, the medical team, the patient communities, what is Jordan syndrome, what does it mean to be living with it, and that's an effort to really get the word out. If you think autism many years ago, no one knew what that is. Today, they know exactly what that is, and that's what we're working towards. Research, we have many members of our research team here. We can't be thankful enough for their dedication and them showing up every time we call on them, and you'll hear from them in a little bit. But it's really the core of what we're doing, is moving us forward towards a treatment and a cure. And then lastly, we added this year support, and that's supporting the family as a whole in multiple ways, whether that's emotional, mental, maybe even financial support, sibling support, but realizing that, you know, it takes a whole family to do this, and we want to be there for all the members of our family. Next one. All right, so I want to just take a minute to kind of encourage everyone to spend time on the JGA website. There's a lot of information out there that you could read and get more familiarized with what's happening. Like the JGA blog, we have 2 blogs a month at the very least to kind of highlight what's happening. The Resource Center is a great way to get a lot of documentation, whether you're a therapist or you're a parent or a teacher, or we have the publications and everything else as siblings, and we are working towards getting the translated documents up there as well. So for our global community, just bear with us. It's on top of our list for this year. So we'll continue to get those translated and available. Irreal Reality, our podcast that Christina hosts, and there's one every 2 weeks. So some of them are specific to our community, and you hear from us about special campaigns or opportunities we want our families to know about. But it also plays a bigger role in advocacy and rare disease advocacy. So we have guest speakers outside of our community come on and talk about different roles. This year we have taken on themes every month, and the podcasts are typically linked to these themes. So another way for you to connect and listen. And they're also available on our YouTube channel for anyone that would require the translation services to read them and be able to access them that way. And lastly, this is how you get the weekly newsletter. If there's one way to connect with us, I highly recommend subscribing to get the weekly newsletter. We'll also have a quarterly newsletter for maybe our research team and our stakeholders that don't want to hear from us weekly, but they want to stay up to date. So highly encourage you go to the main page of the website and sign up, and you can keep track of what's happening that way. Next one.
Carol, can you please speak slow, a little slowly, because reading the translation takes a while and you go very fast.
Absolutely. I'll chill over here, Karina, no worries.
Thank you.
Yep. Okay. And this is our JGA research team over here, and you can go to the website and read about each of them and the great work they're doing. We have documentation really highlighting a summary of what everyone is working on and how we got where we're at today. Most of them are on the call here today, so you'll get to hear from them directly in a little bit. But I want to encourage you to go in and really read a little more about the work that is happening in each of the institution. And one very important thing that I should mention is that they're collaborating in real time, which means that as soon as they find out new data or new information, they're sharing with the rest of the team. And that's really the main reason we've been moving so quickly in the last 5 years, because they're really working with our children's interests on their mind and pushing forward that way. Next slide. So at a very high level, I could spend a long time here, but just at a very high level, and I know Dr. Chung will share a little more there as well. And Joe, if there's anything here that you'd like to chime in on, please do. But in the research roadmap, and I know that's where most of your ears perk up, but we've spent the last few years really creating the toolbox of things that we need in order to move our research forward. And the two paths that we're looking at right now is the drug development. So it's a pill that our children can take to take away the effect of the mutation, or genetic intervention, and that's actually going in and fixing that gene or modifying the bad gene. So, and we have our team kind of going towards all of these. As Joe says, we don't want to put our eggs in one basket. So we have a lot of baskets happening here, but we do believe that perhaps the quickest way forward is to find an already FDA approved drug, or a drug that is going through FDA approval that would work for our children, and kind of use that for our clinical trials. So we'll cover a little more on that in Wendy's presentation, but also in the Q&A, but that's really what we're working towards right now. Is we've identified a couple of these drugs that are already existing that we believe are going to make a difference for our children, maybe not 100%, but close enough to see an improvement in the day-to-day quality of life. And this is when I plead and beg and encourage everyone to please join the research effort, because without our families and your information, we'll not be able to continue what we're doing. It starts with this group and it ends with this group. So we need your information to design these clinical trials, and then we need you to test these clinical trials, and that's how we get these treatments for our children. So the Simon's team is simonsearchlight.org is an amazing team. If you have any questions, just email them directly at coordinator@simonsearchlight.org, and they'll be able to help you through the process. They currently support 5 languages, but they're working on supporting additional languages. So don't let the language barrier be a reason for you not to start the process. Please do that. And then if you need any help, they're here for you. Next, please. All right, our community, we have over 350 families currently in 38 countries. So we've been growing. We've come a very long way from our Facebook group starting with just 4 families 7 years ago. And I remember rooting for our first 50 families. And now, we kind of lost count a little bit, but we keep track of our families, and the only reason here is to be able to communicate with our families when we need you to learn about clinical trials or any other opportunities that are in place. But our community has been an amazing global community. This is the map that Larry mentioned earlier, so we'd love to keep it updated. If you're not on there, please let us know and we will happily add you. Next slide. All right, JGA Ambassador. So this is an initiative we launched last year. So when we met at the conference, we had 5 ambassadors. And the reason here is really we want these soldiers on the ground, per se, that speak the language, know the local resources that can support our families, whatever they are. You can connect with your ambassador at connect@georgiansguardianangels.org. So if you go to the next slide, you can see our 14 ambassadors currently, and we've grown so much, and thank you for all the families that really stepped up to do that. But we have our US regions ambassadors, our Australia and New Zealand that are probably sleeping right now because it's 2 a.m. But we have Spanish and Hebrew, and for Canada, for German, the UK, Italian, Dutch. So a lot of languages are supported, and the ambassadors are even planning like virtual or in-person local meetups, and it's really nice to see our communities strengthen their relationships wherever they are. Next, please. And another way our families get involved is through the Special Projects Committee. We currently have 27 families that act as an advisory committee. So we meet with them and they look at what are the gaps or what are things they like to see as the global community that our JGA team goes back and works on. And we currently have an advocacy subcommittee and in fundraising subcommittee, and then we called it just everything else. So all the other projects will fall under that bucket. But it's an amazing way for our families to really have a voice and make sure they're represented, and their cultures, their beliefs, their countries, their children, in whichever way. So thank you for all the families that have stepped up to do that. So between ambassadors and the special projects committee, we have 40 family members actively working with us to move our mission forward, and that's very powerful. So thank you for that. Next slide. So real quickly on fundraising, Candace have created this 7 ways to fundraise. As I mentioned, the goal for this year is to raise $1 million. And in just the 2 weeks since we launched that campaign, we're at $34,000. So we've really making our way there very quickly. And I mean, Rare Disease Day was what, less than 2 weeks away when we started. So we're really thank you for everyone that has been sharing and encouraging support for our community. But there are other ways to really support there, whether it's in person or virtual events, supporting that JGA 1 in a Million campaign that I'll talk about in a little bit. Christina has taken on the grants writing, and we're really looking at grants opportunities and getting other ways to get funding that way, direct donations. If you work for a company that does corporate matching, or you know someone that does, this would be a great way to put us on their list. And we're looking to do JGA merchandise going forward. So there are lots of opportunities for families to fundraise, even if you just do a quick Facebook fundraiser around your kiddo's birthday. You really be surprised who steps up and supports. I've had people that I haven't talked to since high school or college that reached out and said, we wanna help. So put it out there, and then the universe will react to it. Next slide. So this is the JGA 1 in a Million fundraising campaign, and the goal is to get as many people as possible to watch the great video that Nick and Christina have created with us for us, and to donate just $1 and then share it. And that's the campaign I just mentioned, have raised almost $35,000 in just less than 2 weeks here. We have the video available in multiple languages. So for our families in different regions, you can just share your language and get to your community that way. And you can scan this QR code in here in order to watch the campaign. Next. All right, and then this is our Project Halo, which is a circle of supportive siblings. It's really led by Lexi right now, and the hope is to get 2 more additional adult siblings to help go through the training and really support our siblings. We know that they get impacted by this journey in their own way, and we want to create a strong support system within the community to help them throughout the way. So Lexi has been amazing in doing our first in-person siblings workshops at the conference, and she's held a couple virtual since, and we hope to do more there as well. Next slide. So next week, we start a wellness series, and this one is for our moms. So we have a 6 weeks virtual wellness series on Friday morning, my time. So that will be different times for you. But this is, not intended to be like a medical advice or anything. It's really getting together, thinking about your day-to-day life with intentions. What are things you'd like to change? What are the goals? Do some maybe meditation, think about heart intentions and affirmations. So it's really enabling our families with some tools to take back to your families. So if you haven't signed up yet, spots are limited, but we do have a couple spots available. You could do the whole series or pick the ones that speak to you. And the registration link is here, but we'll follow up with more information on that as well. Next one. All right, just to wrap us up here, and I'm trying to go a little quicker because I realize just for the time's sake here, but there are many ways for families to get involved, whether it's spreading awareness, supporting other families, fundraising, or really supporting JGA's mission by joining the research or being involved in many ways. So this slide kind of summarizes the many ways that easy ways for our families to just jump on and get involved. And we always questions from families. How can I do more? You know, I have all this energy towards this and I want to use it. And there are many ways for you to use it. Or if you have new ideas, new things that you would like to see happen, that would be another way. We're always open to that. And lastly here, and next slide, how to stay connected. So we have a lot of ways, a lot of channels for our families to be connected. You could, you know, be part of our private Facebook group. We're on almost every social media channel, so you could follow us there as well. The weekly newsletter, I can't stress enough how important it is for you to just open it and take a quick look every week, see what's new, any actions for you to do, any announcements. The podcast, whether it is you listening to it or wanting to tell your story or have a guest in mind. And then we also launched our Slack channel last year in order to organize our communities. But a lot of our ambassadors have their own communities, and like whether it's through WhatsApp or Facebook or other ways that they're connecting. Whichever way is for you, please just connect and find your people, and you don't have to do this alone. And this is really the whole point of this. And I think this is the end of my piece of the presentation. And I can pass it along to Wendy to take it on.
Great, thanks, Carol. So for those of you who don't know me, I'm Wendy Chung. I'm a physician scientist, a medical geneticist, and have met some of you, but not all of you, and hopes I can meet some of you at some point. I'm joined today with colleagues as well, who are going to be speaking about some of the data that we collected at the family meeting last summer. So I wanted to show you guys what we found out. I know some of you are new to the community, so I'm going to spend just a couple minutes orienting to some of the medical things that many of you have seen before. So, but I'll give some brief updates that are new. So just to show you the number of people you have working behind the scenes, similar to what Carol had said at Simon's Searchlight, sort of the way we collect much of the data. There's a huge team of people behind the scenes working. I won't go through all of their names, but just to realize you've got a whole army behind you. And Simon's Searchlight is completely free to Jordan's Guardian Angels. It doesn't cost them anything. We do this completely separate from that. And with this, we de-identify all of the information that's shared and share it very freely with everyone in the research community to try and help move things forward. As we're doing this, we also have other things besides the data that you guys are importing. We provide induced pluripotential stem cells for some of you who have provided blood samples in the past to, again, enable researchers to do better research, and also have funding opportunities to researchers to directly fund their research. With this, we thankfully rarely have circumstances where someone passes away, but I will say in this community, due to very generous donation, we have learned quite a bit in terms of understanding over the life course what happens, and that's been really important. So as Carol said, for those of you who haven't joined, I put the URL here, simonsearchlight.org, and we are definitely in many languages and increasing the number of languages. I'm going to be speaking about one of the genes that's the main focus, PPP2R5D, but I know there's sometimes it gets a little bit confusing. There are, as Carol alluded to, a couple other genes that are in the same gene family who are part of the umbrella organization, but I'm going to focus the next few slides on individuals specifically with that one gene. Within this, everything I'm going to talk about is based on information that was provided online. And I put the numbers, these are the different steps in the process. And I put the numbers here mainly for the leadership of the group to be able to see our numbers are increasing, as Carol had said. And we hope that everyone's going to get through at least to step 4 within this. And it takes a little while to get through this, and that's why the numbers at the beginning aren't the end. But I want to make sure people weren't confused, and I'll show you a screen in a second about doing that. These are showing the different steps and the different, these are all online, but surveys that we ask about. Some of you know that we talked to you during the medical history interview. We've automated more of that, so it can be completely online if it's hard to schedule that, and again, in several languages. And then we have other things that researchers have asked about, or as we're preparing for clinical trials, we need to have this information. So let me pause here for a second to say that Carol alluded to, we've been working very, very hard behind the scenes to be able to get ready for the clinical, what I hope will be our first clinical trial that will be of a pill. So not something in terms of a gene therapy. We're not yet ready to announce that we can go forward. We don't have that permission quite yet, but we're hoping that we will be able to. And what we really, really need to see from everyone is where they are, both in the world, is where their child is in terms of different challenges and medical issues. And we're doing that inventory now. And I will say that your data helps to inform how we set that study up. So now is the time. If you've been holding back before, you weren't quite sure if you wanted to do this, now is definitely the time to do this, to stand up and be counted, because we don't want to leave anyone behind. We want to make sure we have everyone represented in this. We also have things that we're going to be adding, again, based on some of the data that we've been collecting over the summer family meeting that's informed, I think, what we're understanding about the condition. So here's what I wanted to just bring to your attention. Some people, many people, in fact, have registered and they've started the process. There's always, in terms of getting, if you're confused about what next to do, when you sign in into your dashboard, it'll always tell you where you should go next. And over here, we'll tell you how many things that you have completed and then what things you still need to do. And so I hope we've made this dashboard easier to understand and to navigate, because we've heard your feedback in terms of not quite understanding what else was left to do. Within this, as I said, we also have induced potential stem cells. I'm not going to go into that today, but to say that many of you have given samples for that and those are being used. And then within this, these are the iPSCs, mainly for the researchers, in case there's anyone who might be listening later. These are all freely available to the research community, except to pay for the cost of shipping. And then this is a figure to be able to show the different genetic variants that we have in the community and to realize that there are several different ones. And as I'm talking about this today, I'm going to lump everyone together within the one gene PPP2R5D. There's some other things we've published on that separate them out, but for the sake of just being able to see the numbers, I'm putting everyone together. Okay. So in doing this, these are all individuals who have what we believe to be definitive diagnoses. So that's pathogenic or likely pathogenic variants. There are a few people who it's not quite certain whether or not their genetic variants is the diagnosis. And so I've excluded them from this presentation in terms of being just really clear about the diagnosis. As you can see, this is a distribution by age, and I apologize, I know I'm speaking quickly. So for those of you where English is not your native language, I will intentionally try and slow down, and but I also want to leave room for my colleagues. This is age shown over here, and then this is showing how many people are in each age group. And you'll see that most individuals are below the age of 10. And we know that this is because, not to say that these are the only people out there who have this condition. As Carol said, I'm sure there are thousands or tens of thousands of individuals, but most people accessing genetic testing are young children. And so that's why we're seeing this distribution. I know many of you know that we do have one gentleman who is out here, our oldest gentleman, and we have a few people who are young adults who help us to think forward about what's going on. All of this is informed by 102 individuals. So we broke 100, which is big reason for celebration, but still the numbers are modest. We know that most of the challenges that we see are related to the brain and behavior. And so we do know that essentially almost everyone has challenges with delays in development. Some of this is, or a lot of this is language, but also, as you're going to see from Jackie Montez, this is also issues in terms of movement and coordination of movement. Not everyone has autism, but certainly about a quarter of individuals have autism, as well as problems with focus and sometimes problems with anxiety or change. We see from a physical point of view that low muscle tone is very common, and a larger head size is one thing that many times the pediatricians will notice right away. When we see other things, we see, again, Jackie's going to talk about this, but problems with either movement disorders or coordination. This is something that even, I think, for parents who don't report this, sometimes we were seeing in the assessments that this can be something that we pick up on as well. Amongst individuals, we do see seizures greater than the general population, but not everyone has seizures. So I want to reassure you, we also know that some people, even as they're getting older, don't have seizures. So not everyone will have every symptom. But when we see seizures, we see several different seizure types. And there are some people that can have even more than one seizure type. Within this, many people were asking about, when should I see these? And if I don't see these by a certain age, can we assume we're off the hook? And I don't know for sure, but it does look like seizures tend to be within the first 2 years of age. So young individuals when they have seizures. We are continuing to watch individuals as they're getting older and in adolescence in particular. But that's not to say that we're seeing a large number of individuals with seizures later. They tend to be younger if they're going to have seizures, and they generally tend to be seizures that are easier to control. And so many times a medication, a single medication will control them. In addition to seizures, which are obviously one of the ones that are important to be able to control, we see some other medical issues. Common issues that we see are with growth, where individuals may be shorter. And we see many gastrointestinal issues, what I call tummy trouble, so problems with reflux or occasionally or many times constipation. And then issues with vision, a variety of vision issues. And this is important to recognize and to treat because it helps in terms of development and learning to be able to correctly see the world around you. This is being able to show the types of medications that children are taking, and seizure medications are the most common, not surprisingly, but there are sometimes individuals who are taking medications to help with sleep because sleep can be an issue, or sometimes sedatives, either for sleep or behavioral issues, and then issues that are also related to behavior in terms of antidepressants. Within this, you've often asked us, what are the most effective medications? And what I would say is we're not seeing a clear winner. So this is looking on the right at many different types of medications used for a variety of indications, either antidepressants, antipsychotics, but you'll see with the column on the right, there are not large numbers of individuals taking any one of these. And as you've been telling us, there, as I said, are no clear winners. It's not as if one medication clearly works so much better than the others. So just very briefly, I'm going to wrap up in terms of the behaviors you've told us about from an instrument called the Child Behavior Checklist. In younger children, not surprisingly, issues in terms of impatience or getting frustrated were common things that we saw. And then as individuals are getting older, frequent distractibility, I would say, is the one that I see quite often, difficulty staying on task, and sometimes that leads to challenges in the classroom or challenges learning, and just needing more attention, more oftentimes one-on-one in the classroom, and being interested in some very specific things, or conversely being concerned or anxious about some very specific things. So in summary, for the most part, we do not see this as being something that's had major medical issues. Certainly some issues with seizures and growth and vision that I alluded to, but mostly related to the brain and behavior and development. So with that, we'll have time for questions later, but I'm going to stop sharing my screen and then invite my colleague, Jackie Montez, who is Dr. Jackie Montes is with me at Columbia. She's a physical therapist and has developed a lot of standardized instruments to assess movement. And so she's going to present, I think Jackie's up here somewhere. She's going to present on the data that we collected at the TWA airport last summer at the family meeting there and show you what she's learned. Dr. Montes.
Thank you, Wendy. Let's see if this works. I can share my screen. Thank you for bring me into this community. It was really a pleasure to be part of the meeting last July and now here today. And I hope I can adequately summarize all the great things we've learned and the excitement in what we are soon to learn going forward. Can everybody see my screen? Does the screen?
Yep, perfect.
Great. So just in setting the tone here, the excitement in preparing for assessing therapies for drug trials, we have to find a way to identify the best outcome measures. And with regards to motor function, it can kind of fall into three major categories. Assessments that evaluate function. So gross motor function being how one moves, like big movements, like rolling and standing up and sitting down and crawling, walking, and so forth. Or fine motor function, and that would be, things that you do with your hands, like writing and so forth. Gait is an important measure, a part of function, how you walk, and endurance, of course. There could be an impairment outcome measure. So depending on what the therapy is targeting, you might want to evaluate muscle strength or flexibility or muscle tone. And another really important domain of outcome measures is person or parent reported outcome measures. And so those are you telling us how your child or the person you care for, your family member, functions in everyday life. So how they do their daily activities, bathing, dressing, eating, and so forth, how they get around. And then also person reported outcome measures can be quality of life, and they're really important. And so in setting out for our July meeting, we chose some assessments that we think might work as good outcome measures for motor function. And so for gross motor function, we turned to the gross motor function measure, or the GMFM. And this is a well-validated, widely used tool in a lot of neurodevelopmental disorders. And so we thought it was the best place to start. It includes assessments or domains of lying and rolling, sitting, crawling and kneeling, standing, and then walking, running, and jumping. And as you can see, as they're listed, they are activities that get harder. So they're hierarchical in a sense. Along with the GMFM, there has been a development of a classification system, or it's called the Gross Motor Classification System, or the GMFCS. And this allows us to sort of give a bigger picture of a functional level of an individual. And so the GMFCS has levels 1 through 5, 1 being the highest functioning, and 5 being the most impaired. And so what's important to note here is that GMFCS levels 1, 2, and 3 are all children or adults who are ambulatory, 1 being not requiring any assistance. And we'll get into more of the details from the data or the things that we learned from July, but it's important to see here that of the 45 individuals that we evaluated at the airport last year, the majority were higher functioning. So the majority were in that the 3 ambulatory groups. And those few that were in the functional levels 4 and 5, you'll see were mostly the younger kiddos. And we'll go back to that as we go over some of the data. Another outcome measure that we collected tried at last July was one for upper limb function, and we took a assessment that was validated in SMA, the revised upper limb module. And the reason why we liked it is because it didn't require much instruction. You could demonstrate, and the items of the 20 items were all very relevant assessments of hand function, like writing, shoulder strength, so like reaching above your head and reaching across your body, and all the activities of daily living, like bringing a cup to your mouth, or writing, or opening containers, and so forth. Like the GMFCS or the GMFM, this scale also comes with its classification system, so a way to classify upper limb function. And again, the scale goes from 0 to 6, 6 now being sort of the reverse than the gross motor, but 6 is the highest functioning category, where children can lift their arms up over their head without difficulty. And so again, the majority of individuals had largely higher functioning upper limbs than not. We also did a quantitative gait analysis. And so for those of you who might remember that little room where we had this fancy mat, this instrumented walkway that gives us lots of information on every step you take, both temporal and spatial evaluation from every step. It's quite detailed, but what I'd like to highlight are two major things that it gives us. It gives us information on gait speed and balance. Well, gait speed actually is becoming a very popular assessment, and in fact, we all think it should be the next vital sign. So the next time you go to the doctor, in addition to taking your heart rate and your blood pressure, they might evaluate your gait speed, because it has gives us good information about where you might have limitations and where you might be in the future. And so we were able to evaluate gait speed at the meeting. And for kids and adults, it's important because it talks about how they might be able to keep up with their peers, how they function at home and in school, and just more broadly, how they're able to participate in everyday life activities. Balance is another really important measure, and we're able to get that from this quantitative assessment of balance, from this quantitative gait analysis. And this is important because it really speaks to safety. It speaks to fall risk and agility. And so these two measures are sort of the key measures that we would look at in a quantitative gait analysis. And then Wendy's mentioned it, the pediatric evaluation of disability inventory falls into that person-reported category. So, and the PDCAT is a computerized adaptive test, so that you only answer questions that are relevant to your child. They're organized in 4 different domains: mobility, daily activities, social cognitive, and responsibility. And what's really important about this is that when we evaluate somebody in person, their best performance, or sometimes it's not always their best performance because everybody doesn't have a good day when we want them to. What's most important is how they function at home with you, and your input is incredibly valuable here. So the PDCAT is a great complementary or an additional outcome measure here. So with that, I'll go over some of the data that we collected in our preliminary results. So again, back to that gross motor function assessment, the GMFM, we found that it worked really well in individuals with PPP2R5D. And what we found here in this graph is each little data point, each little dot is a person, and the vertical axis is their GMFM score. And so, the bigger scores are higher up. And this is age on the horizontal axis. And what you can see, or what we found, is that motor function improves with age till about 10 years old, and then it seems to stabilize, which is encouraging. And of course, this is not one individual over time. This is just many individuals, but it really sort of suggests that there's continued improvement for a while, and that maybe that it's stable. And of course, the next step would be to look at every individual over time and see if there are things that modify that. Similarly, in upper limb function, it seems to also improve with age up until about age 10 and then stabilize. But for the upper extremity function, it seems to be a little bit more variable, and we kind of think it might have to do in part with cooperation. It's a little bit easier to get everybody to cooperate when you're rolling around and jumping and crawling, and maybe a little harder in these more discrete tasks. So we'll see, but the trend is similar in gross motor function. I know going back to gross motor function for a moment, of the individuals that we saw last July, there were 11 different genetic variants identified. And the two most common are highlighted here. It's hard, but when you look at those two common ones, you start to see that the GLU 200 group had a somewhat higher motor function. So this is their GMFM score than the other second, or the most common variant, the GLU 198. And this is important when you look at the assessment, so if the gross motor assessment is able to maybe discriminate across different genetic variants. And so just as sort of another check in the box for maybe the GMFM being a good outcome measure for PPP2R5D. This is another way to look at it. Remember that GMFCS classification system, that gross motor classification system, with 1 being the highest functioning, and 1, 2, and 3 being the ambulatory cohorts. What you could see is, again, albeit there were less people in the GLU 198 group, they tended to be towards the higher end of functioning. So they tend to have higher gross motor function, whereas the other genetic variants seem to have more individuals and have a bigger spread, let's say. Similarly, remember, we talked about gait speed, and so there are lots of normative equations that you can say you can compare yourself to. And so in this graph, this is gait speed, and we've divided the people we evaluated at last July into age cohorts, so ages 3 to 9, 10 to 19, and over 20. And we did that because that's how the norm references are organized. In this graph, the red colored bars represent the females and the blue the males, the lighter bars being the PPP group and the darker bars being the controls. And what's important to just see here is that across the age cohorts, individuals with PPP walk slower than their peers, regardless, and that was across ages and both male and female. And using the same comparison for base of support. So base of support is the distance between both of your heels when you're walking. The wider it is, the more stability you have, right? So the wider base of support means you have more stability, and the more narrow is more challenging. So we use that as a surrogate for balance. So what you can see here, again, the lighter bars are the individuals with PPP2 or 5D, and we found that the base of support was nearly double that of their norm reference, suggesting that there is balance impairment in these individuals. Lastly, the GMF, the PDCAT. So your report, remember I mentioned nothing's more valuable than your report of their mobility in everyday life. And we found when you compare the GMFM score, so our assessment of their motor function at one time point aligns quite nicely with your report of their mobility, and that's what you want to see. We want to make sure that what we see in them in 45 minutes is what aligns well with what how they function at home with regards to mobility. And we saw the same thing with regards to your report of their daily activities and how that aligns with their gross motor assessment. And so if we go back to that slide that sort of organizes these outcome measures by type, at last July's meeting, we were able to really get a good assessment of gross motor and fine motor function, gross motor being the GMFM, and gait as well as endurance, which I didn't present here, but we did the 6-minute walk test, and that's an excellent measure of endurance with norm references. And we were also able to align those with your report of their mobility and activities of daily living. And so going forward, the best assessments have to be easily administered. They are well developed and validated for a particular condition, which I think we made a good start at here from your contribution last summer. And if I could just summarize it, we think the GMFM does well at characterizing gross motor function in PPP2 or 5D. As I mentioned, we think that there's this developmental trajectory that there's improvement, and improvement continues to improve until about adolescence. Motor function may be different across genotypes, and of course, more work needs to be done there. We know, we know gait speed and balance is important, and we think it might be impaired, and it might, hopefully we can improve that with some intervention, and that your report of their function validated or affirmed our assessment of motor function in person. And so with that, I will hand it back over to Dr. Chung or to...
Great. Thanks, Jackie. Well, I think we'll take some questions at the end, but Nicola Pini is going to be the last of the presenters in this block. He also is going to share his data from the TWA airport meeting last summer. And both of these presentations are critical for what I call clinical trial readiness, because we may be using some of these measures in the clinical trial. And so we have now baseline data and feasibility data. So I'll let him go ahead.
Hi, everyone, and thanks so much for inviting me to share the exciting data that we have been collecting. So as Wendy mentioned, I'm Nicola Pini. I'm an associate research scientist at Columbia, and I've been working closely with Wendy and with Jackie on this project and many of you over the call. So today I'll be presenting some of the data that we've been collecting at TWA hotel last summer. And just to orient yourself, what I'll be talking today, it's most about the brain and why it probably is obvious for many of you why we're interested in the brain. I think it's really important to focus our attention on the role of the brain along development in general, but also how can we gain additional insight in genetic condition and also specific mutation. And so, as you know, the brain is evolving in a variety of physiological processes, and we know that there's profound changes in brain functioning and development across the lifespan. And what we're really been trying to get a better understanding and a better insight in is how we can use brain-derived measures to be able to characterize condition amongst the different population and also across development. And as Wendy already and Jackie already summarized, it's important to think about this so-called brain-derived biomarkers, especially in light of potential clinical trial readiness. So where we are right now, and this is some of the data I'll be presenting today, we've been collecting data on a sufficient sample size, and now we're in the process of characterizing biomarkers that again can be used. And I'll be talking more about what we mean by biomarkers. Then the short-term goal is to be able to collect additional samples, and this is why it's so critical to be able to disseminate these findings and this research, and also to get a better outreach in terms of people we can ask to contribute the data. And the idea is that we want to validate this biomarker. So in other words, we want to characterize these brain-derived measures to be able to then move to the last phase, which is the potential of using these measures in clinical trial. And this is very important because we can use them as baseline. So basically, we can collect them prior to any intervention, whatever that intervention may look like. And then we want to reevaluate those same measures and now ask the question, are there any changes? Or maybe we want also, our goal would be to keep some of those measures on a stable trajectory. And so now coming to summarize the data that we've been collecting last summer, and again, I think I left in this slide this first box up here, again, really to give a shout out to everyone who participated into research and really contribute this very crucial and important data. So we did have 33 participants who agreed on participating to EEG collection, and out of these 33 could not really tolerate the net. And as you remember, that was the cap that the participants were in their head. And so we obtained 29 participants with some EEG data. I'll go a little bit more into the details of what we mean with EEG data. But again, I left this number here just to show, and again, give a shout out to the data that we've been collecting and the fact that indeed this looks like a feasible endeavor to be able to collect some brain functioning data. And so, as you remember, the participants underwent 2 different tasks. One was just a ransom state video, and one was an auditory task. And here I'm summarizing, and I know this slide is very busy, but I think for now we can focus on this bottom box just to say that out of those who were able to collect some data, we did obtain usable data for all 29. And this is again to stress the fact that this was a real success and also shows feasibility for being able to collect this type of data, which is not the most easy to collect on average. And again, I think my team and also everyone who contributed really did a great job on this. Then 21 were able to collect some auditory data tasks. So on 21, of course, we were able to collect both baseline and the auditory task video. The idea of the presentation today, so the next few slides I'll go over, is mostly to focus on the baseline data. And what we mean by baseline data, if you remember, participants were just asked to watch a video on the screen, and the idea here is to capture the resting state of the brain, meaning what's the functioning of the brain, how the brain is functionally working on a baseline, meaning in some sort of naturalistic environment, as the brain could function in similar ways during any regular day. And now let's take a deep dive into the data. And so here on the left, I have a schematics of, again, what happened. And I'm sure many of you will remember that we other participants were in this cap on their head. And then now what we actually see on our end is a bunch of squiggly line on a screen. And of course, some of you, I remember, had asked what you actually do with all those, signals running around the screen. And there will be some answers in the next few slides. But what I left here to just get us started on the right is a description, and I'll walk you through the graph in a second about what we collected and what we ended up analyzing. So on the horizontal axis down here, you do have two different labels, which is collected and analyzed. And then on the y-axis, you do have duration of recording. So this means on, for example, on this blue graph that we did collect for most of the participants around 5 minutes worth of data. And this is expected as this was the duration of the actual video itself. And these, I think, attest to the fact that this paradigm was well received by the participants. We were able to collect data, again, of the expected duration that we needed. You do see other a couple of points down here, which is about 4 minutes, 3 minutes. And then we had one participant down here who was able only to keep the net on for about a minute, which again, totally fine. We take what we can get. And this again attests to everyone who was able to participate. And then what you get here on this orange-ish part of the graph on the right is what we ended up analyzing. So as you can imagine, there's a lot of cleaning of the data involved, a lot of the pre-processing of the data. But as you can see, we're able to retain most of the data for everyone. And now also for those only 1 minute worth of data, we still include it in the analysis. We still include it in the results, which will be shown in the next few slides. So since it usually takes me about 2 semesters to go throughout to analyze the EEG signal with students on a regular basis, in a regular school year, I decided to put this graphical description of what the EEG looks like, or at least a way how we can think about taking a pick at the EEG. So as you can see here, you do have different squares, different shapes, a square, an hexagon, a circle running around the screen. And as you can see here, everyone is doing something different despite their going ups and downs. So you do have someone like the red guy over here, who's in a given amount of time is jumping ups and down in much more slowly compared to the circle right here. And then you have someone else doing something in between. And in a way, what we try to characterize of the EEG are actually these two very characteristics. The fact that each of those squiggly lines that you guys saw on the screen when we were at TWA oscillates, or in other words, goes ups and downs at different frequencies. So there's someone going faster, someone going slower. And the amplitude or the strength of that oscillations ups and down is also something we tend to characterize. And we do that because if we're now to think about summing again all these different lines going ups and down, you end up with all those lines on the screen. And the reason for characterizing both of these aspects of the signal is because many neuroscientists in recent years have been trying to get a graphical description and an understanding of these oscillations that are being linked to some of the outcomes. And so in the next few slides, we'll see 3 examples, which is the results shown today, which will be linked to the outcome or some really, I hope, concrete understanding of some of the brain characteristics moving forward. So in this first graph, and for a second, I will like you to totally forget about the graph. Just think about what I will be describing, hopefully in a clear way. So here we do have one of these rhythm, one of these ups and downs that were displayed on the previous slide, which is called alpha. And you can think about alpha as a way for our brain to modulate the external input that everybody, each one of us would experience on a daily basis. So imagine where you're walking on a busy New York City street, and you do have your brain doing two different things at the same time. Your brain is trying to suppress some of the external stimuli in a way such that you're not overexcited, or you're not scared by anything that's going on around you. But also you want your brain to be alert and being able to understand that something maybe dangerous is going on around you. And so the brain really uses alpha as a way to balance these two different conditions. And what has been reported by many scientists and by utilizing different cognitive tests is really this fact that alpha is this frequency that is able to modulate these different external stimuli. And what we've been reporting here on this graph, as this is very graphically similar to what Jackie showed to you. So she did already all the job for me to describe what these graphs are like. But just go over that one more time. You do have your age at the EEG visit. So basically, this is the age at when I saw most of you last summer. So you do have that on the x-axis, and you do have these specific frequency that I just described to you, which is called alpha. And you can imagine this measure as to be the strength of this specific EEG frequency. And again, while in the future, really hope to have individual longitudinal trajectory, in this case, each of these little black dots is a different individual that, again, we saw over the last summer. And as you can see from this graph, and the trend, meaning what everyone is doing as a function of age, is a progressive decrease of alpha, which is depicted here with this blue line. And so while this is somewhat expected in the general population, so alpha is going down by age, as again the brain gets more and more efficient towards being able to modulate and filter out the external stimuli. What we can see here, and I didn't put some other reference data, is the fact that this decrease in the specific population is slightly steeper than what we would expect. And in fact, the fitting of this line is called exponential and not linear. So it really decreases a little bit more in a pronounced way as age increases. Oops, sorry. And this is important because in a way matches some of the concern that some of the families have been describing as, for example, enhanced or increased distractibility in this population. And so maybe this should explain some of that, in the sense that alpha rhythm, it's probably a little bit lower than what we should expect. And again, this may lead to some less ability of the brain to be able to suppress the external inputs. Here in the next slide, we're now taking a look at a different rhythm in the brain. Again, in the previous one we had alpha. In this one we have another one which is called theta. And theta is important because it's been related to memory encoding, cognitive pressure, and also cognitive flexibility. And in this slide, without going into much of the details or going to describe like what's high or low, I think what it really is important here, if you were to think about what this would depict, which again, as on the horizontal axis, age of the visit, and theta power on the vertical axis. Here you can see we do have fewer points compared to the previous slide because similar to also what Jackie did, we wanted to give it a try on see whether or not there were differences as a function of the specific genetic mutation. So here, and again, take this with a grain of salt, as you can see that the sample size, so the number of points on this slide is even smaller than one of the previous. But what we can see here is that as a function of the genetic mutation, we do see the trajectory. So basically this line, which again is trying to get an understanding of the longitudinal development of this measure, is different. So as you can see, the group in blue starts a little bit higher than the one in red, and then at some point around this age, we do have, again, a switch in this trajectory. This to say, again, that the specific genetic mutation probably plays a role in some of the phenotype that we do observe. And again, we also want to characterize this, as this is really important to get a better and overall understanding of the brain. And lastly is the last results I'm going to show to you for today, which is going back to a rhythm that you all know well now, which is alpha, which you saw 2 slides ago. And now on the x-axis, you do have one of those measures that Wendy had described to you. And I'm sure many of you have also heard in the past. It is the violin composite Sandler score. And here I wanted to plot this to say that definitely we think that brain-derived measures, so EEG biomarkers, can be a way to be able to correlate with some of these scores. So here, we're not talking about brain measures to be predictive of future outcomes yet, but in the current phase, which is now a few slides ago, we showed to you, say that we can use brain-derived biomarkers to map some of these outcome measures of interest at the baseline level, and potentially ask the question whether or not this could be predictive of future outcomes or other future measure that we're interested in. Because as you can see here, now we do have pretty much good mapping on this violin score over the alpha power. Again, to stress that definitely some of the information collected are indeed reflective of some underlying brain mechanisms that we're able now to observe, characterize, and quantify in a much more precise and efficient way. So with this, I want to wrap up by not spending too much time on this slide. It's really more to maybe reflect on some of the key points. I hope we were able to demonstrate successful and reliable collection of resting state EEG data. Also wanted to put up here that all this processing, all this data cleaning was done using some of the mostly common use methods. And this gives us the opportunity not just to think about using this measure within the specific core, but rather having this also to be contextualized with some of the other data out there. And this is so important, as sometimes we're limited by small sample size. But again, we do have now the opportunity to get this upscaled and really contextualized with other data up there, which is very, very exciting. I hope I was able to give you a gist of what we mean with this fancy and maybe scary words of resting state derived biomarkers, which really is numbers that we can quantify, that we can reliably extract from the EEG signal. So starting from a lot of data, get to like very more manageable but quantifiable informations. And then, as also Wendy and Jackie and everyone are really stressed, our hope is really to get to gene and condition-based metrics that we're able to characterize individual differences and get to the longitudinal story that is really going to be so important, especially getting ready in the preparation for clinical trial readiness. And with that, I really thank you for your attention and again, for contributing this very precious data. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Nicolo. I appreciate the team's involvement and all the great data that was collected at TWA. So before we open up for the Q&A session, if you have any questions, you can start entering them in the chat. But I want to give the rest of our research team an opportunity to introduce themselves and kind of so we know who you all are. And let's see, Stefan, do you want to kick us off? Just your name, your institution, maybe a very brief overview of the focus of your work.
Sure. I'm from the University of Iowa. My name is Stefan Strack. I'm sorry, I have to shut up my son here real quick. Who's speaking in the back? Probably more loudly than I am. Yeah, my name is Stefan Streck. I'm from the University of Iowa. My contribution to the research mainly deals with working with mice, developing mouse models of Jordan syndrome, and trying for essentially promising pharmaceutical drugs to treat at least Jordan syndrome, again, in these mouse models.
Thank you. Brian?
Yeah, so Brian Wodzinski, I'm from Vanderbilt University in Nashville, Tennessee. And I guess my group's contribution has been to look at the biochemistry of PPP2R5D holoenzymes. We've been particularly interested in developing tools to better study these, the structure and regulation of this enzyme. These include antibodies derived from both rabbits as well as alpacas. And they have been useful for better understanding the function of this enzyme.
Thank you. Verle?
Yes, hello everybody. So I'm Veerle Janssens. I'm from the University of Leuven in Belgium. And my team is involved in many different aspects. Biochemistry at one hand, but we're focusing, let's say, more and more also besides on the R5D gene, on the R1A and the R5C gene, with a clinical publication that is close to being submitted now for R5C. But so I would say, more of our biggest focus is on R1A and R5C and mouse models of these genes.
Thank you. Richard?
Hi, I'm Richard Huncannon. I'm at the University of South Alabama in Mobile. And we're working on the generation of cell lines. So we're using, you've maybe heard of CRISPR, to generate cell lines that mimic the different variants, and then looking at the biochemistry and trying to figure out some of the signaling pathways that can be altered by existing drugs. And then we're also working on the ability to fix the different variants on a cellular level.
Thank you. Kyle?
Yeah, I'm Kyle. I'm at UC Davis. Our primary involvement is in the creation and the distribution of the induced pluripotent stem cells that could be turned into neurons, or like little brains in a dish for study, as well as focusing on the genetic interventions for Jordan syndrome.
Thank you. And last but not least, Jan?
Hi, I'm Jan Nolta. I direct the stem cell program in the Gene Therapy Center at University of California, Davis. Well, I'm fortunate to work with Kyle and to work with this whole amazing team. And my particular specialty, I've been in the field for 30 years. We work with the FDA, and we work on the transition from the incredible discoveries at the bench to through translational science and getting toward the clinical trials. So very, very happy to see all of you. Thanks.
Thank you. I don't think I missed anyone, right? Anyone with the camera off? Okay, perfect. Wendy, we have a few questions in the chat that perhaps you can help answer.
Sure. So I think I'm starting with the questions from Italy. Is that right, Carol?
Sure. Yep.
Okay. So I think the first question is about what can be recognized most at the earliest age, in particular for newborns. And I would say it ends up being the head size. So larger head size. And when people are measuring height, weight, head circumference, that's the thing that we see most consistently and earliest on. I'll also say, unrelated directly to this, but for other studies that I'm doing for a program coincidentally called Guardian, although not the same Guardian as Jordan's Guardian Angels, we are doing a pilot study of newborn screening for genetic conditions, and this includes conditions like PPP2R5D, to be able to make the genetic diagnosis very early on and make sure that we can do it at scale and do it equitably for everyone. So that's another dimension or another way that in the future maybe we'll be recognizing this, but large head size is one that we see earliest on. I'm not sure I understand the second question, which is about brain tumors in the cerebellum. So we tend not to see tumors with this condition. That's the good news. So I don't know if someone wants to clarify, or Carol, if you know what this might be about. Maybe not.
Any input on that?
No, that was the question, Dr. Chang. You understood correctly.
Okay, so the good news is we don't see brain tumors. We do see larger head size, but it's not because there's a tumor growing there. So that should be reassuring. There's a question also about as children are getting older, some issues with muscle joint pain, and if there's anything that can be done with this. So we do see problems, as we said, with hypotonia. And as Jackie said, the way that individuals are moving, their gait and how they're coordinating their movements is a little bit different. It may be putting some strain on joints in a slightly different way. And we can talk about this offline if anyone's interested, but that may be part of what this is. And within this, I don't know of anything other than kind of the usual thing, AFOs for certain individuals as they're learning to walk, some usual things in terms of heat, massage, things like Tylenol to help, but I don't have anything beyond that. Whether or not this will be treatable by a drug that we ultimately use to treat the condition, perhaps. I will just emphasize again, the reason why Jackie and Nicola did the studies they did is we want to have an objective way to see whether a drug is getting into the brain and whether it's having an effect on the brain in terms of normalizing some of those brain waves, behaviors, and then output from the brain, the way the body moves. So that's putting those pieces together.
And then the next question is about the EEG and clarifying what we mean by overactivity in the EEG.
And Nicola, you may want to clarify, but you weren't specifically using the EEG in the same way that we do for looking at seizures. And so maybe you want to clarify that.
Yes, correct. So happy to fall back on this offline, but I'm not entirely sure when I said overactivity, but yes, as a general consideration, we do use a collection of EEG activity using a non-clinical equipment at the same, and also we interpret that in non-clinically. So it's a totally different pipeline, totally different way of looking at that. I don't know when if that's
right. So we do. So many of your children have had clinical EEGs looking for what we call spikes, which are what we see with epilepsy, and what Nicola was looking at is distinctly different. So anyway, it's a different way of looking at the electrical activity going through the brain.
Thank you. And then the next question here is if we could use some of that data when we evaluate the children to suggest treatment or any way to improve the skills, like individualized next steps from that data, like a care plan.
So I don't know, we'll talk about it amongst the team. We hadn't talked about it, at least among the Columbia team. Perhaps the next time we have a family meeting, I know we've done it sometimes in the past where we have time for some one-on-one types of meetings. And we can talk about whether or not that would be helpful. It's hard for us to do, as you remember from the family meeting, we were doing back-to-back and just running like crazy. So we didn't have time to do the measurements or come up with scores or analyze the data. And we won't have time to do that real time in a family meeting. What we'd have time to do is do like brief touch points as we've done before, just hearing from you about what are some challenges, do we have suggestions, things like that. But we can talk about it as a group.
And Wendy, do you think the standard of care that you're working on would help some of that as well?
Yeah, so let me shout out to Lexi. Lexi Levine, as many of you have heard from, she and I have been working offline in using these data to come up with a standard of care document that both describes what's going on and then tries to make suggestions about what should be the best way of caring for individuals over time. We hope that'll be helpful in terms of payers paying for, the things that you need access to, both in terms of from a medical point of view and perhaps services. It hasn't been submitted yet for review, so I can't guarantee what the response is going to be, but for those of you who don't know, Lexi actually has a day job, so to speak. So she's been doing this in her free time and been doing a great job with it. And hopefully, I know it's sitting in my inbox, Lexi. Hopefully we'll get this submitted soon.
Perfect. So the next question, when Jackie was discussing the age group of around 10 stabilizing, what does that mean? Will the level of growth decrease as they age?
I'm happy to jump in, Wendy. Yeah. So I guess the take-home message we get from that graph, or the take-home message that I get, is that when in the younger kids, even if their motor function isn't where we might want it to be, there's promise that they'll continue to gain skills. Maybe it's not at the same pace as a typically developing child, but from the early younger years to age 10, what I take away from that graph is that there's promise that they're going to continue to gain motor function skills up until adolescence. What I get about the next part is that typically in adolescence, where there's a big growth spurt and their bodies grow faster than maybe their muscles and brains and nerves can keep up with, you usually see maybe a decline in function. So if the system isn't ready to support a bigger body, sometimes gross motor function declines. And what it seems to be is that there might be more of a leveling off, which is encouraging, that you're not losing ground just because your body is growing bigger. It's really early to say anything more than that, and that when we look at every individual, we can see where their trajectory is. But I hope that explains it. I don't know, Wendy, if I missed something there in that explanation, but.
Right. So I think there are a few things. So as Jackie said, this is looking at different people at different ages, or what we call cross-sectional. The real question is, if you look at the same person over time, is there a way that we can continue that upward trajectory? And I think what this tells me is what Jackie said is, as the body is changing, we shouldn't let up. So in other words, I think there are going to need to be more services and more that we're doing to help with the physical and occupational therapy to accommodate to those adjustments the body's making, and perhaps even intensify that at those ages to be able to keep up. That's if I take home something from that, I think that's where we've got work to do, and we'll see whether or not that has an impact. I don't know, but because the children are making such nice progress until that point, I would love to see that continue upward.
Thank you. Then we have a question from Monica, mom of Santiago, who's 15 from Mexico. And she says that Santiago has been experiencing seizures since birth, and she lists all the medicine that he's currently on. But her question is if there's any specific medication to control anxiety, because they deal with high level of anxiety that it's almost impossible to interact with him.
Yeah. So I will say, without knowing all the details, for Santiago, it is unusual to have seizures that are that severe and to need that many medications. That's not typical for what we see in the community. And we can talk about which diagnosis this is and whether it's 2R5D or something else, but it's not typical for 2R5D. Beyond that, in terms of medications that people have used and what ends up being helpful, There are, beyond the ones for seizures, there are antipsychotics that certain people have used. There's cannabidiols that certain people have used, and then sedatives as well as classes. And again, I'm not making specific medical recommendations since I don't know Santiago's details, but I would have your doctor watch this presentation afterwards, and then they can contact me offline to see if there might be something that we've learned that would be helpful. But if you can have his doctor now sort of see all of this, since his doctor knows him best, we'll try and touch base offline.
Perfect, thank you. Next question from Natalie in Israel. What is known about morbid overweight in the syndrome?
Yeah. So there are a couple things that come on. So this is not a condition that always is associated with weight problems, either up or down. It definitely is associated with growth problems where people tend to be shorter, not teeny tiny, but shorter. There can be issues with weight that either come because with the hypotonia, the energy requirements are lower, so they don't necessarily need as many calories. Some of the medications that we use for behavior can lead to weight gain. And so some of the issues in terms of gaining too much weight, obviously I don't know the specific situation, but can be secondary to the medications. And so be careful with that, and your doctor can make adjustments if necessary.
Thank you. And a question from Pooja. Are there any thoughts about including vision assessments in the future? Could this be a useful data point to assess when it comes to repurposing drug interventions?
Yeah. So Lexi and I are definitely addressing this in the standard of care document. It's very important in terms of making sure vision is constantly assessed. Unlike some other conditions, vision doesn't tend to deteriorate, and it's complicated because there are structural things in the eye where I don't think this is going to be a great outcome measure per se in terms of a clinical trial. I don't think we'll see changes quickly enough, and they may be due to other factors. In terms of assessments that we do at a meeting, one of the other things I've talked about this with my ophthalmologist, there's equipment that you need to be able to do this that's not very portable. And so I haven't come up with a great solution to do this in terms of taking some of the equipment to the sites, but I understand the issues. And if we can figure out something that the children can cooperate with that's mobile, I'm certainly happy to try adding it in the future.
Thank you. Question from Imke from Germany. At our clinical EEG, it was shown that our son has very fast beta waves. Our doctor has never seen this before. Do we know anything about it with Jordan syndrome? So fast beta waves.
So I have to say, Nicola, I don't know if you want to comment. If not, we can take this back to the epileptologist.
I think that sounds great. Again, just to reiterate that this is probably something much more clinically based than what we have been showing with this type of EEG. But yeah, definitely something worth touching base on.
Thank you. The next question from Carla. My 23-month-old son cracks his knees and ankles, which causes him pain. This happens every day during the night and day at different times. So far, the doctors have not been able to give him answers or treatment. Any comment on that?
So I don't, at least in my experience, this hasn't been typical to have cracking. Definitely, like I said, hypotonia, and some individuals will sit in kind of a W position because of that and may put some stress on their joints. I don't know, again, I don't know the specific, Carla, in terms of anything that's going on, and I assume they've done things like x-rays, or the orthopedists have taken a look at things, and I assume there's no swelling or tenderness or redness, but someone should be looking at all of those to make sure nothing's going on with that.
Thank you. That was the last question in the chat. Any other questions? Joe, anything from your end you'd like to comment on?
No, I think we'll take this offline with Wendy, but I was noticing in the actual data from Simon's Searchlight, I've seen on our Facebook page a little more activity relative to seizures with our children. So it may just be a function of getting more people enrolled in the data points with Simon's Searchlight.
And I'll just mention one other thing I've definitely heard from everyone is about the tremors, and tremors starting younger than we had previously recognized. So that's something we're also addressing.
Great. And let's see, Kyle, can you speak quickly about the upcoming planned mice clinical trials?
Yeah, sure. And so I don't have slides, so I'll just kind of speak to it a little bit.
Putting you on the spot here, I realize that.
No, that's totally okay. No worries at all. And so as a lot of people know, there's been an immense amount of work going on with the tool development for Jordan's Guardian Angels. So mouse models being created at the University of Iowa, cell models being created through the New York Stem Cell Foundation and Simon's Foundation, as well as here at UC Davis with us. And really, and everybody across the research team really contributing to understanding what are the differences that we see in the mice, what are the differences that we see in the cells. And with that, several promising candidates in terms of a small molecule. So like what they were saying, kind of the quickest path to possibly a treatment may be a small molecule drug or a pill that could be repurposed for Jordan syndrome. And so work that's come out of both University of Iowa with Stefan and work out of South Alabama with Rich and Verily and everybody else in the group, we're starting to coalesce kind of a pipeline for the mouse preclinical or clinical trials. So we'll be able to start testing and drugging mice with compounds to assess whether or not they help with things like EEG, the hyperactivity, the motor deficits, and cognitive deficits. And this is really building off of a lot of work that's been pioneered at Iowa that we'll be reproducing and scaling up. And then again, like Jan said, we'll be working really closely with the entire team and Wendy to understand what are the steps that are going to be needed to potentially think about rolling out a phase 1 clinical trial, repurposing promising candidate drugs that we have. So one of our big pushes that we've been doing right now is developing a streamlined pipeline in which we take promising candidates. And we kind of take all of those great ideas and kind of put them through the funnel of what works in smaller studies, and then starting to scale it to the big studies that would be necessary for a package going to the FDA. So I don't think we're going to disclose today any of those incredibly exciting data or compounds that have been identified specifically by Stefan. I think we have a lot of hope with one, and we'll just be continuing to build a lot of the data around that for hopefully moving very close to patients, hopefully sometime soon.
Perfect. Thank you, Kyle. And Wendy, just to wrap up this section, what should our community expect the remainder of this year and early next year?
So again, the main things are to be able to finish up for those of you who have started some instruments on Simon Searchlight. For those of you who haven't signed up, really, really important to sign up now and have your genetic test results uploaded so we can confirm you're there. We'll be using this to be able to understand where people are in terms of clinical trials, how old they are, if they will be eligible for things. I will say specifically for those of you that have older children, I think some of the trials might start in older individuals first. And so especially important for you all if you think you might be interested. Signing up doesn't, oblige you to anything. It doesn't say that you're required to do anything. And certainly any communications will also go out through JGA, so you'll know about it. But we will quickly be looking in terms of feasibility for studies based on who's registered within Searchlight. And if the numbers don't look good, it may be harder to convince people to do a trial. So please have yourselves counted and make sure that you're represented.
Thank you. And when you're saying older, Wendy, you mean 12
I'm
and
sorry,
older?
12 and older is good point. Yes, Carol, 12 and older especially.
Yeah, so please, we need everyone to sign up because as you know, Wendy and the team are doing these negotiations with drug companies to get them to let us try these drugs that the rest of the team have identified that works for could work for our community. We need the numbers to support that, and so we can go back and say we have X amount of people ready to try those out and get the approval to do that. So this is really more important than ever to get our data ready so Wendy and the rest of the team can use that as a leverage to move our efforts forward. Jen, anything you'd like to add before we wrap up?
No, just it's amazing to be part of this community, and I can't believe how fast the science has progressed. Just due to all the teamwork, it's really impressive, and we're doing everything we can as fast as we can.
Thank you. Thank you. I appreciate everyone's work in here. We had 88 participants in real time here today, a lot of engaged families that want to hear it directly from you. So thank you for all your hard work. It's been just amazing looking back at how far we've come. So thank you to all of you. What's next today? So we're going to take a quick break. If you need break, go get your break, but we're going to be opening up breakout rooms per language. So your ambassadors are going to be there in these breakout rooms. Just a couple kind of housekeeping during these rooms. If you're comfortable and you're able to, please put your camera on so your group can see you and be able to talk to you that way. If not, that's okay. Don't need another thing to stress over, but if you're able to, I want to encourage you to do that. So you build these connections with the community. If you usually talk too much, please step back a little. And if you're shy, please speak up so everyone gets a chance to participate in the sessions. The ambassadors will be there to facilitate, speak your language. You don't have to use the translation services or anything like that. If you need any of us, just ask for a moderator and we can jump in and support you. We will create a breakout room for our research team, but that will be for our research team if they want to kind of touch base and recap after this meeting. If you're ready to move on with your day, that's also okay, but that's an option for you if you'd like to take it. If none of the rooms that are available fit you, because we weren't sure what languages and regions will join us today, just stay here and we'll organize that as a result. And we're gonna do
it's Jody.
Yeah, go ahead, Joe.
Hi, Carol, hold on just one second. I want to reiterate Jan's point about the research. We really are ramping up. We are really ramping up quickly, so quickly for trials to help our children. And the data points with Simon Searchlight, having more people involved is really going to help both in terms of working with the FDA here in the US, but also with the drug companies. So I just can't reiterate that more, I think, Carol.
Yes, absolutely. And we've partnered with Simon Searchlight on their Shine Your Light campaign. And these are, you know, every week or two, you're seeing me post about the next step, and our numbers have been moving as a result. So that's really exciting to see, but we're still about 50% participation, and I know we can do better. So I want to ask you all to do your part, find another family to talk to them about how important that is. Our ambassadors play a huge role there, but we need our community to step up and do that so we can all move forward with the clinical trials. Okay, that should we attempt a group picture perhaps? If you're on and you're comfortable having your camera on, please do that. I have a large screen here. I'll try to capture us, but anyone else that would like to do that, please do that. I'll give everyone a minute if anyone else wants to turn their camera on. How exciting is that? So glad to see you all. All right, anyone else? Oh no, I'm on 2 pages. All right, we'll do page 1 and then we'll do page 2. Ready? All right, let's start with page 1. One second. Let me get that captured. Oh gosh, my computer is not liking me today. Okay, 1 second. Let me save that and we'll do page 2. Assume you're in both pages, so smile anyways. And then Kayla will do her Photoshop magic and combine these pictures. So, all right, page 2. Perfect. Thank you all so much. Always great seeing you all. So we do have a brand new video that we'll be sharing right after the breakout room. So hang in there till the end. I promise you want to see that Nick and Christina have come through yet again. So please stay around to see that. We will post it afterwards on the page anyways for anyone that needs to drop off. So we're going to do 5-minute break, 40 minutes of breakout rooms, and then come back here and do our wrap up. So we're going to open the rooms now. If you need a break, go get a break. And when you're ready, come in and find your breakout room. Thank you, everyone.